Wonderful. Wonderful. So this incredibly comprehensive report that we're launching today has been written by our wonderful colleagues, Bridie and Miriam at the Mental Health Foundation. And I'm delighted that we will be shortly hearing more from Miriam from NHF as one of the report's authors. So before we get properly started, I'm going to just very briefly share one slide with you. Easily do this. Okay, so this is our Safer Spaces agreement. We share it at the start of really every workshop, every event, everything that we do. So you will see that throughout my slides, I've also peppered them with images from our Anti-Stigma Arts Fund work, which made them much more fun to write. And I'm very happy to say that we'll be hearing from two of those projects later today as well. So this is the Safer Spaces agreement that we ask everybody to agree to. Simply keep yourself safe, share only information that's yours to share, take time out if you need to, respect that everybody has different views and experiences, treat people how you'd like to be treated, and keep any personal or private information confidential. So just come out of there to say, does that feel okay with everybody? Does everybody feel comfortable with that? I'm seeing some nods. Okay, fantastic. We also always have somebody providing safeguarding support in any session. So though we're not anticipating any particularly challenging material today, you never know how something might strike you. So our safeguarding person for today is Anna Cook. Give us a wave, Anna. So if you feel like you would like to reach out to Anna, you can do that in the chat if you've got the chat function available to you. I'll just give it a shout if you don't. And she can arrange to have a chat with you. She can open up a different breakout space to have a chat if you feel you needed it. So we have a collection of absolutely wonderful partners here today to help us to launch the report. What we want to do is celebrate some of the work that has taken place over the last few years, but also really to explain the evolution of our learning at CME and really try to articulate how and why the projects that are described in this report are not just a kind of pleasant add-on to our real work, but an absolutely critical part of our anti-stigma mission and a crucial space for our move into taking a more intersectional approach across the programme, which I'll explain more about in a little while. So everyone here today will be bringing their own experience to this room. So I know we have some really experienced creative facilitators in the audience here today, or you may have less direct experience of the work, but whatever your role or experience is, I hope that there's something here that you can really take away with you and take forward in whatever context. If you have access to the chat function, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Anna and Anna, another Anna, will be keeping an eye on the chat. So if there's any questions or comments that you have as we go, please feel free to pop them in there. We will have a little bit of time for questions at the end. We might not get to everything, but we will try to follow up if there's any questions that come along that we don't get to today. So to kick us off, I'd now like to pass over to CME Director, Wendy Holliday, just for her reflections on this report and the work that it describes. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Maeve. And a big welcome to everybody. It's lovely to see so many people on the call, and I really appreciate you taking time out. I know how busy it is, particularly, well, I was going to say particularly at this time of year, but it doesn't seem to ease up at any time of the year. So I'm very grateful to you for joining the session, and hopefully you'll get a great deal from it. As you know, for many years, CME's been working around mental health and the arts, and really using creativity and different methods of art and engagement to try to connect people. And I think, you know, there's a long-standing and appreciation that mental health can really be supported through the arts and creative means, both in the sense or in the sense of connection, so bringing people together, in the sense of supporting well-being, and also, you know, it's used therapeutically in respect of early intervention and prevention, and really, you know, it's such a strong way of supporting people's recovery. So I think, you know, that connection is strong and it's long-standing. I think, however, one of the things that we've been really keen to do was explore how stigma, and continue to learn how stigma and discrimination can be explored, understood, and challenged through the arts and creativity. And over the years, I think our understanding of the benefits of that have really been forming and developing over time. So I think that we've invested in many partnerships now, many projects that seek to address specific areas around mental health, stigma, and discrimination. And we understand really that this is a community development approach is so incredibly powerful. It brings people's stories to a human level. And I think, I mean, there's two areas of anti-stigma work generally that's talked about. One is about social movement and social activism to drive forward action on stigma. And obviously arts and creativity is a fantastic tool for doing that. But the other really most powerful thing I think it does is about social contact. So the jargon being social contact, where it's about bringing the reality of lived experience to the fore, and using that reality in part to help people understand, but also to really engage people in a way that connects them, you know, so that people can understand the different experiences that people have. So I think on that human level, what we understand is our work and other partners' work really provides the opportunity for many people to share their views and experiences, both individually and collectively, and as I said, in a really powerful way. Over the last few years, we've been much more focused on taking an intersectional approach. And through that, we've really targeted, our arts fund has really targeted and been quite specific about engaging and linking with people, groups and communities who are often not heard. Their voices aren't shared. The stories, their experience can be missing from the data. And I think what this approach has allowed us to do is genuinely engage with our partners and through the organisations, groups and people we work with, to genuinely look at how people do experience mental health stigma and discrimination alongside the other forms of stigma and discrimination that they may experience. So it's that kind of whole person, whole experience story that's able to be brought to the fore through the arts and creative work. It's supported many of the participants to share their stories and experiences in ways that we can understand, but also that we can gather that data and then use it to inform what we do across the programme elsewhere, to influence our policy work, to influence our settings work and our comms and campaigns. So I think this much more, and hopefully you'll see from the report that what we do is we gather that data and then we use it and apply it across the programme as a whole to really try and influence change at scale. I think that the other point is that, you know, the report itself gives a great overview of the work and describes the benefits and the value of combining arts-based creative approaches with intersectionality. And it really does help us to understand and address the mental health stigma and discrimination that's experienced by people and their reality. But the other thing I think the report does is it really underscores that creative approaches are not just a nice thing to have. They're really essential if we want to be authentic and engaging with people in meaningful ways, and to genuinely partner with people and have that flexibility really of how the the work is formed, I think it's central to any intersectional approach and any anti-stigma approach that's been taken forward. So I guess on that note, I hope that this report, I think it's a great tool, and I hope it will give you further insight into our learning and our understanding, but more importantly, to connect you with different partners that have been involved in this work, and hopefully start to build more of a collective around mental health stigma in the arts through an intersectional approach. So I'm hugely appreciative of you joining us, and it'll be great to hear and see the rest of the session. So thank you. Thanks, Maeve.
Thanks so much, Wendy. That is a great start to our session. Now I'd like to introduce Miriam from the Mental Health Foundation, one of the authors of the report, who will be able to give us a little bit more context and some of the key learning. So thanks very much, Miriam.
Hi there, it's so good to see you all here today. I'm just going to share my slides, so just bear with me 2 seconds while I try and work out what I'm actually doing. Share. Can people see that? Brilliant. Okay. So yeah, it's fantastic to see you all this morning and be able to share and talk to you about a piece of work that we're pretty excited to launch. I'm Miriam Scott-Pearce, just to say again, I work for the Mental Health Foundation as a research officer, mainly working in a learning, evaluation and research partnership with CME. And together with my wonderful colleague, Bridie Rudd, who's a research manager at the Mental Health Foundation, we've completed this report, which explores the ways in which creative approaches can be impactful in tackling mental health stigma and discrimination. Just going to double check again that you can see my slides. I'm really paranoid because, okay, great. Lovely. So trying to explain the development of this report is a bit tricky, as it evolved quite a lot throughout the writing, but in a nutshell, the report first started as a kind of fairly discrete piece of work, and it quickly grew in its scale and nature. And with so much really valuable evidence, we saw the justification and the need for a much bigger piece of work. And this ended up becoming a report which evaluates the ways in which CME has used creative approaches to tackle stigma and discrimination over the past 5 years. And creativity has become so central to CME's work within the Anti-Stigma Arts Fund and more widely as well. So it was really important to take the opportunity to draw out that learning and reflect on the evidence around this to inform kind of practice and CME's approach going forward. And just to explain very briefly about how we did this kind of learning and impact report, the evaluation used a mixed methods approach. So we analysed several pieces of secondary data, which included annual Anti-Stigma Arts Fund reports, post-event reflections, and feedback from project partners and participants. And we also surveyed staff members at CME and had informal interviews with staff partnership organisations like the Scottish Mental Health Arts Festival. And our colleagues at CME helped us to develop a set of evaluation questions which guided the process of writing the report. So the report kind of looked at 5 key questions. And the first one was about how creative approaches are used by CME to tackle stigma and discrimination. So CME draws on a range of creative approaches to tackle stigma, and these include visual arts, theatre, music, and lots of other forms of creative expression, as well as supporting community-led participatory creative processes. And this includes CME's Anti-Stigma Arts Fund, as well as other creative projects that CME has engaged with over the past few years. The second question looks at how creative methods have been used to further CME's intersectional approach to anti-stigma work in Scotland. So we found that community-led creative approaches have been instrumental in addressing a historical lack of understanding within CME and more widely of the intersectional nature of mental health stigma. So by funding projects that explore intersecting experiences, so for example, stigma related to mental health, then layered with racism and sexism or other forms of discrimination, CME's reach has expanded, and they've been able to build relationships with a greater diversity of organizations. And we also found that working with partners who are really embedded in communities, and including marginalized communities, that can help to ensure greater autonomy and choice in sharing experiences rather than it being extractive or transactional. The third question we looked at was, how can creative approaches help us to understand the nature of experiences of stigma and discrimination for different groups? So it's clear that creative methods can provide trauma-informed, structured ways to explore and understand different types of experiences. And as was found in the Alliance report, which you'll hear a bit about next, arts-based approaches can help to transcend traditional language and literacy barriers, and can help to give participants agency and help to foster empathy in groups. And the fourth question we looked at is about the role of CME as a funder in supporting inclusive, creative anti-stigma work. So the funding model for the Anti-Stigma Arts Fund emphasizes flexibility and trust, and it allows partners to design and evaluate their work independently, but with support from CME. And this has been really important for ensuring strong relationships and to develop a greater understanding of intersectional stigma. So organizations have the autonomy to decide what suitable outcomes and indicators are for their specific community and context. And that's really central to the development of the fund, is giving them the power to decide their own outcomes and indicators and have support where needed from CME. And the final question looks at the extent to which creative approaches have helped to reduce mental health stigma and discrimination experienced by groups supported by this approach. And it's abundantly clear that creative approaches have led to increased confidence. They've reduced self-stigma and a greater willingness to discuss mental health amongst participants. But projects have also sparked important community conversations and built really supportive environments. And there was so much positive feedback from participants, from partners and audiences that we looked at, which really highlights the transformative power of the arts in challenging stigma and discrimination. So the report highlights several key factors that make creative approaches so effective in tackling stigma. So active participation in creative approaches and in creative processes by people with lived experience of mental health problems has proven really effective in addressing internalized and public stigma, and it can empower people to share their experiences in a way that feels meaningful and authentic to them. Peer support and group elements of creative processes were also really valuable in fostering community connection and kind of collective catharsis. And we found that the visibility of creative works in public spaces also can help to reduce stereotypes and negative stereotypes around people who are experiencing mental health problems. And creative approaches can also help to build mutual understanding about how different social identities and inequalities can intersect and interact with each other. Creative approaches can also help to shift power to those who are most affected by stigma in a way that's authentic and beneficial to participants. And we found that psychological safety was absolutely crucial. So building trust is really vital, but it can take a lot of time and consideration. So a common theme that we looked at across the Arts Fund reports was that creating this environment which allowed for deeper levels of trust and honesty between participants and between funders and organisations takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of careful consideration. But this was really fundamental to go through this careful process in allowing the benefits of creative approaches to be realised. So creative approaches can be an immensely powerful tool in tackling stigma, it's clear. And across much of the evidence that we looked at, participants reported reduced self-stigma, increased confidence, and a greater willingness to discuss mental health in a way that felt meaningful and beneficial to them. There was real consideration across many of the projects, to ensure that stories of lived experience were not extractive or transactional, So participants could choose to share as much or as little as they liked through such a different variety of methods, and that was really important. And this is one of the many really powerful quotes, which I'll give you a couple of moments to read. You'll hear more about this project in one of the next presentations. It was part of the Empower Women for Change. But I just think it really kind of speaks to the power of the different kind of transformational benefits of creative approaches. So the project was not merely about community engagement and workshops. It was a form of community education where everyone collectively learned from one another. It created a trusting and supportive space where participants felt comfortable expressing their feelings and emotions at different levels through the act of making. So drawing upon all of the learning and the evidence, we developed a set of key recommendations for CME and any other organisations or people using creative approaches to tackle stigma. So the first is to prioritise peer support, so building in opportunities for mutual support and learning amongst project participants and facilitators. As I said before, it takes time to build trust and develop meaningful relationships, and space for mutual support must be meaningfully created. It's also really important to adopt, where possible, a really trauma-informed approach and ensure that projects support participants' mental health and well-being throughout to avoid re-traumatization of participants if they're sharing personal experiences without feeling safe and in control of their narrative. It's also important that sufficient and sustained funding is provided to organisations. So creative anti-stigma work needs sufficient flexible funding for planning, delivery and evaluation. And continued investment in creative participatory approaches is really essential for this long-term sustained change. And funders should be flexible and trusting of the organisations that they're funding. This has been something that's been really central to the Anti-Stigma Arts Fund. So funders should empower communities to shape their projects, create their own outcomes and indicators, and adapt to their specific needs and contexts and communities that they're working in. And it's also really important that project outputs and lessons are integrated into wider anti-stigma work and shared nationally to embed the learning. So I don't know what time we're on, but thank you so much for listening to our to what was such a whistle-stop tour of a really long report. If you've got any questions, then please pop them in the chat. I think we've got a tiny bit of time allocated for questions a bit later on, so we'll see if we get around to them. But alternatively, you can contact me or my colleague Bridie via email, and we can have a chat. The email addresses are on this slide here. So thank you very much, and I will pass back to Maeve, I think.
You will. Thank you so much, Miriam, and thank you, Miriam and Bridie, for this incredible report once again. When to say it's long, it is an absolute beast because it packs in so much. You will see when you get to take a look at it. Huge piece of work, and we're very, very grateful to all the work that you've done. So one of the things that this report really crystallises is the importance of collaboration and building coalitions. Many people here will be engaged in work similar to the projects described in the report. You may have a strategic role in being able to support their development, and if so, and you recognise any opportunities for collaboration, then please do get in touch with us. But on that note, we're really delighted to be joined now by Jane Miller, who's Programme Manager at the Alliance, and Mia Duncan, who is the researcher working on the Alliance's own fantastic report, developing a picture of creative engagement in anti-stigma work. And just to invite them in now to really kind of join forces on advocating for this approach. Thank you so much, Jane.
Thank you. I'll just share my slides. Oh. There we go. Can everyone see that okay? Perfect. That's always the tricky part at the beginning. So thank you so much for inviting myself and Mia today for the launch of your creative approach. We're here just to share some kind of key insights from some of the research that we've undertaken, which looks at creative methodologies in anti-stigma work, which really complements a lot of the findings and recommendations from the report that's been shared today. So just before we kind of get started in terms of sharing, I'm just going to give a bit of background about the Alliance. So the Alliance is a national third sector intermediary for health and social care. We bring together a diverse range of people and organisations who share our vision of a Scotland where everyone has a strong voice and enjoys their right to live well with dignity and respect. And we work with our members and partners to ensure that lived experience and third sector expertise is listened to and acted upon to ensure that people are at the centre of policy, support and services. So in 2022, the Alliance, recognising the prevalence of stigma, decided to host a series of events as part of the Reducing Stigma Emphasising Humanity series. And this series really explored people's experiences, key learning and practical tools and tips and resources in order to try and help tackle stigma. And we took a really holistic approach to looking at stigma. So we looked at multiple forms of stigma, recognising, as has been recognised today, that kind of intersecting experience. So we looked at mental health stigma, we looked at stigma related to weight, to gambling harm, to problem substance use and to homelessness. And this resulted in a report with key recommendations. One of these recommendations was that anti-stigma engagement work really needs to be underpinned by a human rights and equalities-based approach. And this led to further research to explore recommendations that did sort of highlight the role of creative approaches in taking that human rights-based approach. And we had undertook some research, which was a small-scale piece of work which involved 11 interviews across May and June 2024. And this was really looking with stakeholders at creative projects to tackle stigma. So I'm just going to hand over to Mia, who's going to share some of the insights from the findings and some reflections in relation to CME's report as well. So I'll just hand over to Mia.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks everyone. It's really great to be here, and it's been really great to see the report from the Mental Health Foundation and see that the findings that we're looking at stigma from mental health kind of broadly complements the work that we've done looking at stigma in health more broadly. So on the next slide, I'm just going to talk through some of the key findings from our piece of research. So broadly, we found that the creative process itself plays a really crucial role in tackling self-stigma. So through participating in creative projects, it enables people with lived experience to kind of express their identities and build confidence and gain a sense of agency and belonging. Through the creative output, we found that can have a powerful effect on public stigma. So it helps audiences connect emotionally and challenge stereotypes in ways that traditional awareness campaigns maybe can't do as effectively. In terms of the reason we were looking into creative projects was around human rights and equalities, and what we found was that while that language wasn't necessarily being attached to the creative projects, across the interviews, the principles associated with them were coming out really strongly. So especially around participation and empowerment were key to the creative projects. And then finally, in terms of measurement, we found that measuring outcomes in creative anti-stigma work required more flexible and reflective methods. So prioritizing participant voice and qualitative insights was more useful for demonstrating that impact. On the next slide, I just kind of pulled out some key things that kind of came to mind through reading the Mental Health Foundation and CME's report. So for us, it's great to see that some of the core ingredients that make creative anti-stigma work effective were really coming through in both of those reports, specifically around kind of giving people space to tell their own stories and a method through which to explore intersecting experiences of stigma came through really strongly. They also share a strong message around power and participation, and that the kind of most meaningful change happens when people are led by people with lived experience, and that organizations acting as partners can cede power rather than gatekeep. What's great about having these two pieces of research is that it gives us the evidence and confidence to advocate for these approaches really well. So I'll pass back to Jane now just to talk through the next steps, but thank you.
Thanks, Mia. So in terms of our next steps, we're going to be continuing to share the research, including looking at adapting a creative version of our report, Creative Output. We're also really committed at the Alliance to ensuring that we're embedding the principles into the way that we work. So from planning events to our engagement to dissemination and that influencing piece that Mia talked about. We're also really excited about further opportunities to collaborate with CME and other organisations and really value the strength of those creative approaches and challenging the stigmatising narratives. And I just really wanted to reflect on what Wendy said earlier around that collective, almost like a movement approach together. So as Mia was saying as well, we've got the evidence now and the strength of these approaches, and it's really the next step. And one of the recommendations that we also had within our report was really around that sustainable piece around funding of creative approaches. And I think that point about not being a nice to have, but actually really essential to this work is really important, and having the funding as well to support that is essential too. So in terms of some of our next steps as well, we're actually going to be together, the Alliance and CME, we're going to be hosting an event next week as part of the Scottish Mental Health Arts Festival called Disturbing the Picture. So this is going to be a creative participatory workshop with a focus on photography and how photography can be used as sort of a narrative or a tool to help reclaim narratives around mental health, well-being and life stories. So that event's taking place next week, the 4th of November at the Pyramid in Glasgow, and we can share a link to that as well. But just to say thank you very much for having us along today, and congratulations with the report.
Thank you so much for that, Jane and Mia. It really is wonderful just to see how much common ground there is between the research that we've both been involved in, and really just that call for let's all collect together and really kind of make the case for this approach, because if we're thinking about funding, the landscape out there is not great at the moment. We know that it's a difficult time. And on that note, I would really heartily recommend anybody who's in Edinburgh to get along to Summer Hall to see the Out of Sight, Out of Mind exhibition, which is run by Cats Advocacy. They are in a really critical situation. They have lost funding their creative work and their collective advocacy work. They're being very, very vocal about it because they're an advocacy organisation, so they're not going to take it lying down. So if you can get along, it's an unbelievably good exhibition. It's incredibly well curated. It brings together so many different organisations doing grassroots participatory creative work. So if you can get along to see it and leave a lengthy comment explaining why this exhibition is so vital, I'm sure that would be very helpful to them. So that plug done. Not that it's a plug that's anything to do with my work, but I am going to share my screen again in a moment. So this report, it's a wonderful report, describes a variety of creative projects, including volunteer-led work, commissioned work, other partnerships that really date right back through the history of CME. But I want to spend a few minutes now highlighting kind of one aspect of this work that we've mentioned quite a few times, and that is CNE's Anti-Stigma Arts Fund. So I'll just share my screen. Can you all see that okay? Yeah. So I really want to do a little bit of a focus on this because we've heard a lot about creative approaches and a lot about intersectional approaches. And so I'd like to kind of explain a little bit more about how we've brought those things together in this fund. So the fund was launched in 2021, so we're now in our 4th year of the fund. And over those 4 years, we've funded 19 incredible projects. The Anti-Stigma Arts Fund is quite small. Projects can apply for between £500 and £5,000, and we've been able to fund between 3 and 6 projects each year. The development of the fund, as I said, coincided with the development of an intersectional approach for CME. So I wanted to take a few moments to describe how intersectional principles have come to underpin all aspects of the fund. As this will be a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, I want to draw people's attention to a previous anti-stigma session that we did specifically about intersectionality and intersectional approaches, and we can share that recording later. And also our intersectional community engagement tool, which brings together intersectional principles and a community engagement approach. But put very simply, intersectionality recognises that we all have intersections of identity and experience. And so our race, our gender, our socioeconomic status, physical ability, and many other aspects of our identity or experience can't be understood in isolation from each other because that's not how we experience them. So when we're thinking about mental health stigma, our interventions can't ignore the way the different forms of oppression and marginalisation coexist. Intersectional anti-stigma principles tell us that in order to tackle intersectional stigma, we must name and seek to dismantle harmful systems of power, centre community leadership and meaningful engagement, and support collective action and community cohesion. These principles have certainly been exemplified by the funded projects themselves, but we as funder have also tried to build them in at each stage of the funding process. So this includes our evidence-based priority setting, our relationship building, how we promote the fund, how we create our supporting materials, our process for shortlisting, how we communicate with applicants, how we develop our learning sets for the funded projects, and finally, how we disseminate the outputs at the end. We're learning every year. We certainly have much more to learn. So one of the things that I mentioned there was evidence-based priority setting. And to do this, we have collected and analysed disaggregated data to understand who has been applying to the fund and the intersections of experience that they seek to explore. Through doing this, we could identify any gaps and set this alongside wider evidence, which indicates how people experiencing certain forms of marginalisation are disproportionately impacted by mental health stigma. So as a result of that, for example, this year we asked for project applications that could demonstrate meaningful engagement with the impact of poverty and its intersections with mental health stigma. So everybody had to demonstrate that. We also particularly welcome projects with a focus around experiences of racially marginalised communities, physical disability, and mental illness or severe and enduring mental health problems. And this was very much led by the data. So we're really deliberate about how we focus the fund because, as we have already heard from different people, one of the things that it does is give us as a programme greater understanding of the nature of intersectional mental health stigma. Experiences of stigma are not universal, and as the national programme tackling mental health stigma and discrimination, understanding the nature of how stigma is differently experienced by different people and communities is vital to our work. As we've built new partnerships, new networks have opened up to us, and we can see year on year the shift in the applications that we've received to the fund. And I don't just mean the different intersections that are being kind of represented. but also the way that people describe the work that they do is changing too, and we're seeing a lot more references to power and systemic injustice. Many organisations working in communities have years of experience and expertise in understanding systemic marginalisation and multiple forms of oppression. And there are also many community-based organisations thinking deeply about power dynamics, relationship building, as well as creating spaces for community solidarity and support, because they've been doing it for years. So for the fund, we wanted to ask questions in the application that made it easier for organisations and groups to explain those things to us. So as an example, these are some of the questions that we have added to our application. What's your organisation's relationship to the participants you want to work with? Is community engagement and lived experience core to your way of working? And perhaps crucially, how do you know it will be a positive, worthwhile, engaging experience for participants? And in the case of the projects we fund, the answer to that third question is usually because this is something people have asked us for, because this is an extension of a conversation that we're already having in other spaces, or because they co-wrote this application with us. In addition to asking questions of the organisations that we fund, we also ask a lot of questions of ourselves. And we are still learning a lot from our partners and the broader evidence about what it means to be an ethical funder. We've thought a lot about our relationship with the projects that apply to us. For example, during the shortlisting, we use the concept of epistemic justice to try to combat bias or assumptions or preconceptions in the shortlisting process. So in practice, this means we ask ourselves questions about the resources an organisation might have at their disposal, depending on their size, which would affect how much time they can dedicate to writing funding applications or how polished, therefore, a final application may appear. We also ask ourselves questions about, are we looking to confirm pre-existing conclusions, or are we genuinely open to understanding new ideas and perspectives and perhaps challenging some of our deeply held assumptions? We also provide detailed feedback to any applicants who would like it. We usually get over 70 applications to the fund. The maximum number of projects that we'll be able to fund is 6. So that's a lot of people that we're unable to fund. So offering feedback is a really important part of the process of the fund. Overall, we also recognise that there is an inherent power imbalance in the relationship between a funder and a funded project. And to mitigate this, or to try to mitigate this, as we've heard other people describe, rather than try to be very prescriptive in our approach to project planning and evaluation, we invite funded partners to create something that is meaningful to participants in the way it seeks to understand and tackle intersectional mental health stigma and to evaluate it in their own terms. As there is so much amazing, thoughtful practice happening across the funded projects, we've been really keen to bring project leads together through our online learning sets. And this is really a peer support space for sharing expertise or offering support. So what has all this led to? As we've heard, Miriam has described, we can see clear evidence of reduced internalized and public stigma, which the evidence and this report demonstrate are completely bound up in those broader wellbeing outcomes like community connectedness, reduced isolation, increased confidence, and feelings of trust and acceptance and belonging. The work and learning created through the Arts Fund have been used to influence at multiple levels, and just as a couple of examples, the Unblemished comic book that was created in the first year of the fund has been used by social workers to understand the experience of seeking mental health support as a trans person. And the Say Women comic made with survivors of sexual abuse is now being used as a course material for nursing students. Additionally, learning from the fund is being shared through various groups, including the Mental Health Leadership Board, the Equality and Human Rights Forum, And it is also influencing our own internal work, including the development of our manifesto and ongoing settings and comms-based work. That is plenty from me speaking about the fund. But now let's actually hear from two funded projects. So I am delighted, first of all, to welcome Asma, who's the founder and CEO of Empower Women for Change, to share some of the reflections on their wonderful Beyond the Canvas project they ran last year. And I will share your slides, Asma. Yeah, here we go.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Asma Abdullah. I'm the CEO of Empower Women for Change. Thank you very much for this great opportunity, and thank you again for being a great funder, supported the project throughout the period of the implementation of the project. And also my thanks to Glasgow University for helping us a lot during Beyond the Canvas project by supporting our publicity and other, and also with the exhibition. Also my thanks to Farida, who coordinated this project. She's now in this meeting. Thanks a lot for really bringing this great work. Okay, can you move to the next? So just a few words about Empower Women for Change. We are a grassroots community-led organization. We help women, ethnic minority women in Scotland, to thrive and make meaningful contribution to society. And we are supporting them mainly to lead life which is free from discrimination and inequality. Also, it's led by women with lived experience and in the staff, volunteers, and the board. And also the most important thing for us is we are trusted by our community and we are led by their needs and issues. Next, please. So Beyond the Canvas, it's a great project. It's a project actually to help ethnic minority women reduce barriers and of stigma to mental health, and also to improve their confidence to self-reflect and also talking about their experience. So actually the project actually helped to empower the women, improve their resilience, and also help them through skill building, where they delivered 10 workshops and using different forms of arts, from painting, drawing, and knitting, and storytelling. And the impact was at the end, you can see from this painting is being done by the whole group of the project, and it speaks itself. It's showing, it shows how they became like one community, like a friendship group at the end, and this is big impact. And also later I will talk about some ideas for future plans, which is expanding this kind of great partnerships. And also the exhibition has been really very powerful, and all the people talk about the impact of creative work in really improving well-being and improving self-reflection. Next, please. So some of the challenges faced by ethnic minority women and girls, actually in terms of mental health itself and in terms of stigma, actually the cultural aspect, where there is persistent stigma and silence around mental health, and so many barriers and taboos, and we know this from my background as an African. This seems like mental health is considered like a social shame or taboo. So this is something embedded in some of the community, and I guess many ethnic minority community. So I think lack of cultural competent service is also one of the issues, but I think this partnership show when people work together and with small grassroots organizations, great things happening, and lived experience will lead the work. So that means there is more reality in the work rather than just people just decided thing or like using like representation to the family. But when people involve grassroots organization, because the whole organization is built on lived experience, they have experience from the community as a whole rather than having like just one representative to the community. So I guess this partnership really helped to really bring the actual lived experience among ethnic minority community. I think intersectional issue, most of the people talk about it, which in this, I just want to highlight how this really affecting young girls in terms of conflicting identity, and this compounded with the stigma and the issues around mental health. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? So the approaches we take here, we always co-create anything with our service users, and all the projects actually created after consulting them, and they are leading them, they are facilitating all the work, and this is happening in all our projects, not only in mental health. And most of the people before me talked about how blending creativity with safe conversation bring a very, very good impact. And actually, our approach is also empowering women to be able to express and lead through creating for them safe space, a space of understanding, acceptance, and respect. Can you go to the next slide, please? So few case studies about the impact. They talk itself about this great impact on the participants of Beyond the Canvas. Participants build confidence and leadership skill, shared experience, and reduce stigma. And as the exhibition at the end of the project, which is like a big partnership exhibition where 1,500 people visited the exhibition, and they have really amazing, powerful feedback about the work of mental health stigma. And this actually creating ripple effect where families and community also started to talk about mental health stigma. Next, please. So the powerful impact in the voice of the women who took part in this project. As one person said, for the first time, I could speak about my anxiety without fear. And another lady said, my painting was my voice. I didn't need to explain. This shows how painting helps people to express themselves. And this project reminded me that my story matters. And I have a very powerful feedback, but it's very long. I can't put it here. Excuse me just to read it. This is one of the participants of Beyond the Canvas. She said, everything seems to go wrong. I'm drowning, but no one can help me because they see the big smile, the cheerful disposition. They see the mask of happiness and well-collected and fun woman who seems to light up a room and make others feel good, while the real sad face is hiding within, bursting into tears, begging someone to notice, to lend a hand. In the midst of all my worries and upset, I was suggested to try beyond the canvas, where I was reminded of my biggest passion, one I had forgotten for a long time: art. Creating art brings me peace. Creating art has an unexplained phenomena effect that allows me to silence the 1,000 thoughts per second I tend to experience, allowing me to focus on one single thought or one single feeling. The art creation process offers me an escape period, and instead of thinking of all that troubles me at once, I can focus on one single pain and let it go in the art piece. Beyond the canvas seemed to offer me a space to create and be in touch with that part of me that allows me to find and embrace myself again. But beyond the canvas was more than art. I finally understand that it is true to its title, because it offered so much more than art. It offered true healing. It offered a safe space where I could be free of the burden of masking, and I could share the troubles, the sorrow, the pain, and use art as a therapy tool to heal and cope with all the things we go through. Especially as women of minority who are in many ways fish out of water, I have always felt like I don't belong, like no one could get me or understand me because no one could truly see me. But I belonged here. Here in the midst of this group of exceptionally talented women who, despite their very different upbringings, cultures, races, and religious beliefs, were all one and the same. We all have been through so much and have come here in hopes that we will strive despite it all. They quickly became my family, and beyond the canvas became my home. Very powerful case study. So, and this speaks itself about the impact of the work we have done and about the impact that this partnership from CME Anti-Stigma Fund, what they done. So can you move to the next slide, please? So this is one of the paintings. Also, it speaks about the impact. One of them said, beyond the canvas, values. She said kindness, belonging, shared humanity. Yeah, you said it all. Okay, the next slide, please.
Sorry.
So together we can paint a new story of mental health. Oh, I think maybe I jumped to. So our call for action here, and most of the people before me, they talked about this. We are calling to include grassroots organization in national mental health partnership. We are calling for fund to be sustained and community-led models. Also, this is mainly create pathways for women with lived experience to lead the change. Next, please.
Oh, sorry.
And no. So again, I will say together, when we are working in partnership, we will paint a new story of well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Asma. And to Farida as well, who is here and was so closely involved in that project. It's a wonderful project, and I'm so glad that you read that quote out in full, because it tells you everything about the importance of this type of work, and what an incredibly powerful and impactful project it was that you were able to pull together, because of the trust and the space that you created with the women that you work with. So I cannot thank you enough for that project and for being here to share it with us today. So thank you very much indeed. Inevitably, of course, we're running behind time, but it's worth it. It's worth it. So I'm now delighted to welcome Lily, another of our funded projects, this is a brand new, just finished project. So it's not actually one that's spotlighted in the report, but it's absolutely a continuation of everything we're talking about today. Sorry, my screen just went absolutely haywire. Welcome, Lily, VCU coordinator at the Simon community, to speak about your project.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to present and make sure that works. So just give me a shout that that's all good.
Yep.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you very much for having me as well to present See Me. Again, like Maeve said, we've just kind of completed our exhibition at the weekend, so there's a lot we're digesting and kind of working through. But just to introduce who Simon Community is, we provide homelessness services across Scotland, and in Edinburgh, we're particularly lucky to have the Street Reads Library, which is a really unique, safe, warm space for people experiencing homelessness to access support, social connection, but also kind of a range of creative activities. So we have poetry workshops, and we also kind of have our art groups. So as the VCU harm reduction coordinator, it's my job to facilitate some of those activities throughout the week, but also to focus on supporting people who experience homelessness who also might be at risk of drug-related harm. And just to explore that experience a little bit, it's something that we learn and listen to every day with the people that we support, and their experiences of stigma, and how not only experiences of stigma related to mental health, substance use, and poverty intersect, but also how they kind of often directly feed into each other. So, for example, many people who experience mental health problems or poverty-related stigma, these often are exacerbated by each other and feed into one another based on the experience of stigma and the lack of, and the barriers that are then kind of put in place to access support. And then this can also contribute for some people to who develop substance use issues as a way of coping with mental health stigma and poverty-related stigma. And that can cause, again, significant barriers to accessing support. Many people we work with who use substances report facing a lot of stigma when they access support services, whether that's housing, healthcare, a range of different settings, even in the public perceptions of their use significantly prevents them getting support. So, for example, like lots of people we work with will be told that their substance use is the cause of physical or mental health issues, and this isn't something that can be addressed until they've dealt with their substance use, and prevents people accessing support in that way. They won't be spoken to directly in their meetings. The healthcare worker might only speak to their support worker, rather than themselves, and they often feel ignored. Their treatment preferences aren't honoured, and they feel excluded from the conversations about themselves. And so what we kind of understand this to be is a really cyclical trap of all these different kind of stigmas operating together, and ultimately underpinned by that mixture of societal, internalized, and institutional stigma. So we listen and we learn a lot from those people, and we haven't had an existing art group that we wanted to hear from them on what they would want to do with this Anti-Stigma Fund. And so they were very instrumental in creating this project. And they articulated kind of two needs. The first being a space for art therapy, something that's not easily accessible for most people, let alone people who experience poverty or mental health related issues who experience homelessness as well. And so we split the fund into these two projects. The first being the art therapy program, which was a 12-week program we completed in September, which was facilitated by a local arts therapist, Sylvia Turonis, who isn't here, but who was amazing and really listened to what the people we support needed. That particular project, using this fund, had 3 core aims, which I think are really reflective of what's kind of been commented on by previous speakers today. And that was to create a safe and meaningful space for participants to reflect on the connections between stigma, their experiences and mental health, but also to facilitate these conversations through using creative arts to understand and reflect on the connection between self-stigma and systemic stigma, and be able to externalize that self-stigma. And finally was about creating a space to increase confidence and empowerment to describe these experiences and just generally within themselves. And so the second part of the project, which we, again, like I said, just completed the exhibition, but it was it's been a weekly peer-led art group. It's a space in our Streetweeds library for us to take a step back and for them to take turns leading the art group in their own choice of art making, and they would be paid and empowered to do that themselves. So we've had sewing, we've had painting, we've had clay modeling and all sorts of things that it just empowers the individual to show their talent, their skill and their expertise, and to lead their community in understanding more through that. And so it's kind of just fostered that space for peer support as well. And so some of the pieces throughout those weekly sessions have been where it kind of contributed to the final exhibition. So just to briefly talk about some of the outcomes that we observed through the art therapy program, we didn't take any photos to respect confidentiality and anonymity for that project. But I chose this image here because I feel like it just really encapsulates a lot of the experiences that we were witnessing. So people were coming in almost with the weight of the stigma that they experience on the daily basis, just walking down the street, coming in with all these thoughts, emotions, and heightened sense of self. And they would report throughout the program that their anxiety would be significantly reduced after the session. They'd feel more relaxed. They'd be willing to go back out into the world and kind of just a little bit with their shoulders a little bit like kind of straighter. And it was a space for initially people not to feel pressured to articulate their experience, as is kind of more traditional with talking therapies, but to allow them to do it in a creative capacity, which people find much easier to do, and allows them a space to not feel pressurized to verbalize a lot of that, but actually just to articulate it through creative processes of their choice, which was really beautiful to see. Alongside that, the kind of group nature of the group meant that there was an opportunity for peer support to really foster in that space, and kind of a mutual discussion of internalized stigma. So where people were kind of calling each other out on it, almost in a sense of like, you're saying you see yourself like this and I don't see you like that. And it was just really nice to step back and allow that to happen, and allow a space for mutual experiences to be shared and to begin to understand them in isolation from themselves, but also in a kind of community setting. And so one of the outcomes we've observed kind of on the basis of that is that their overall confidence grew throughout those 12 weeks. And by the end, they were able to much more articulately describe their experiences of stigma and social discrimination beyond themselves, and actually see it in context of societal oppression and societal barriers to access it, for them to access support and to thrive outside of that. So again, this is all quite new, so there's lots more I want to explore from it, but those are kind of the key things that we observed in the art therapy program. And then just to highlight some of the key parts of the exhibition, ultimately was about kind of challenging perceptions, public perceptions of what it means to be homeless, what it means to be a homeless person, and all those stereotypes and stigma that come along with that. So it's mentioned in the report as well briefly about using community spaces as a venue for art exhibitions. I think we used our Streetweeds library for that reason, and that the participants were empowered to design the layout. They wrote the wall descriptions, and they were paid if they would like help to facilitate, if they were helping set up, and it just gave them that sense of ownership and control in that space. And part of of our mission to challenge kind of mental health related stigma was to have interactive art pieces as well in the exhibition. And I just really liked the idea that it would distort the kind of power dynamics of people the public coming into the space and almost being put on the spotlight themselves, by choice. They didn't have to do that at all, but it was more about just saying, challenging the idea that for so long, people who experience homelessness and substance use related stigma are isolated and ostracized from wider society. And actually, this was a chance to say, you're coming into our space and we're asking you to participate with us, and putting them more on that level playing field than is kind of typically seen. So that was a really beautiful part. And again, I'm waiting to kind of catch up with all the people that were involved in it so we can all discuss it and get some more feedback about their experience of it. But I know that everyone had a really great time over the weekend, and I'm just excited to observe more of those kind of observations. So some of the pieces as well themselves were just directly used to challenge stigma around mental health, poverty and substance use. So we had one series by an artist, and he described to us, and he wanted to share with the audience, that it was a series that brought him into the light after he experienced darkness himself. And it just, again, reiterates what has been said throughout this conversation today about investing in creative approaches to tackling stigma, because for him it was one of the, despite hospitalization, despite rehabilitation, the creative approach was something that really brought him into the light. And I thought that was just like a really important thing to include, to highlight the talent, the sheer just amazing talent of these artists, and to challenge that in relation to what is typically kind of assumed about people who experience homelessness and substance use. Sorry, I'm talking very fast. I know, I'm just conscious we're out of time, but just to finish, I wanted to share a quote from someone that did come to the exhibition, which was that it was wonderful to see a whole creative people celebrated in the exhibition. And I think that's what kind of I wanted to reiterate from what Wendy said right at the beginning, is that these are whole people, seeing them much beyond the surface level stereotype that we associate with people, beyond their mental health, beyond their substance use, and beyond their experience of homelessness, was just to see the sheer talent and creativity of our community, and to share that with everyone, and to open our doors to celebrate that. So thank you for listening. I'll probably put my email in the chat if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up or anything. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Lily. Anna and I came to visit the exhibition at the weekend, and it was wonderful, and it was particularly wonderful to be welcomed and shown around by one of the participants. It was a wonderful experience. There's so much to say about both of these projects. I don't have time, but what I will say is, I think what is absolutely clear is the sheer level of thought that has gone into, for both Beyond the Canvas and the Simon Community Project, the sheer amount of thought that's gone into every level of the project really shines through. That is how they have had such a wonderful impact at each point. So now we are going to jump, I think we've got 10 minutes